All right, Javosai, good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning's share. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Tishrei. Jerry and Sarah Wolaski for dedicating all the Shimon Drushos this month. In the Schusar for Shalema for their grandson, Zechariah Dov Ben Paroshira, Shane and Avram Kelman in memory of their beloved parents, and in the Schus of all those who need a refuah shalema, Dr. Linda Weinberg in loving memory of her husband, Dr. Paul Weinberg Peretz, Moshe Ben Avram David, and Leah Sol as a schus for refuah shalema for her daughter, Ilana Bas Esther, and for all those in need of Yeshua. So our Day of Learning sponsors, Paul and Kathy Palik, for refuah shalema for Rabbi Chaim Glazer, Chaim Ben Leah Hindel. We of course dedicate our learning as well in the schus, the holy soldiers of the IDF who are engaged in multiple missions on multiple fronts. We hope that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will give them incredible siyata d'shmaya to be successful in all of their missions. Dedicate our learning in the schus of Achinu B'nai Yisrael, who are facing such overwhelming circumstances, but of course always face these circumstances with poise, with dignity, with optimism, and with hope. We hope that our learning in Meretz Hashem will provide them with extra chizuk or refuah shalema to all those who have been injured, and aliyah for the neshama of all those who have been taken from us. And halavai, the schus of our Talmud Torah, we should be zochem Meretz Hashem to everlasting shalom. Jose, with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Nun Tes 59, and we are picking up in Meretz Hashem on Nun Ches Mabez. We have the little last piece of the Mishnah in Meretz Hashem to be able to finish up. The last piece before of the parak. Sorry, we have the last couple of lines of the previous parak in Meretz Hashem to finish up. I didn't want to rush through Paraduma yesterday, so we're actually picking up on 58b, and we are picking up 2, 4, 6 lines up. No, not from the end of the page, but from where the parak ends. So 6 lines up for the parak ends. So let's remember again, one of the interesting things that the Mishnah mentioned was that a man could go ahead and be mekadesh a woman with mechatos, efer chatos, which is paraduma water, paraduma ashes, which of course, just even at first glance, sounds very strange, as we would assume that these items are consecrated. So the Gemara says as follows. Let's analyze this. Tanan, hamakadesh b'tshumos u'b'maisros u'matanos u'matanos b'mechatos u'be'efer para harezu mekudesha. So that's the quote from the Mishnah. A man is mekadesh with truma, with meiser. Now remember again, I both say, in yesterday's daf, we qualified that a little bit. Remember again, are you actually being mekadesh with trumas and maisros? No. Why? Because that would be tovas hana, and we've paskin in yesterday's daf that what? Tovas hana is not mammon, it's not a financial benefit. Remember again, so the Gemara understood that the Mishnah is referring to a very specific case of where my Kohanic maternal grandfather passed away, and I inherited those things. Okay, so that's trumas maisros. Matanos, mechatos, befer parazim gedeshus, the alpha pish Yisrael. Or minu. So one says, really, is this true? After all we learn, listen to this. Hanotos schar ladon. If a person accepts money to judge a case, dinav betelin. Ultimately, again, his judgments are batal. Laha'id eduso. If he accepted money to go and give testimony, ultimately, eduso betela. His testimony is batal. Lahazos ulakadish nemav. If a person accepts money to go ahead and sprinkle the waters of the paraduma, or to sanctify the waters, so ulakadish, meimav meima'ara, his waters like cave water, the afro makla, and ultimately his ash is just like regular ash. So the point over here you see is that if you use para aduma, water or ashes, as some type of financial instrument, or somehow receive compensation for the process, then what? You've negated the Kiddushin of the entire thing. So how could the Mishnah tell me that halacha l'maisa, I could use it for Kiddushin? I will say, now I'll mention something very interesting. If you take a look, actually let's first read the Gemara. So Amar Abai says, Lo kashya, kan bischar hava'u milui, kan bischar haza'ah v'kiddush. So Abai said, this is very interesting. So Abai says, in general, Abai said, is a concept that a person is not supposed to receive compensation for a mitzvah. Right? What a person is allowed to receive compensation for is for tircha, effort involved in the performance of a mitzvah. So for example, you can't get paid for administering the process of paraduma. What can you get paid for? The tircha involved in drawing the water, in fetching the water, right? Transport, so we'll call it associated logistical activities you're allowed to get paid for. You just can't get paid for the performance of the mitzvah itself. Now, this is actually an interesting concept. Take a look at Rashi. Rashi says, B'schar hava. Just before I actually read Rashi, so the way Abaye understands it is, the Mishnah is talking about someone, when we say Mekadesh a woman with para aduma, ashes or water, it's not literal. What it means is, if you get paid for the process of transport, right, you could use that money to be Mekadesh a woman, or you could assign that money to a woman, and that could affect Kiddushin. But in the Brisa said that if you go and you receive compensation for para aduma, you invalidate the ashes, invalidate the water. That's referring to someone who actually gets paid for administering the service itself. Take a look at Rashi. This is fascinating. B'schar hava, about 4 lines from the end of the parak. Rashi says, B'schar hava, ha'efer mimakom l'makom, u'schar milu yamim. So if you get paid, for transporting the ashes from one location to another, or you get paid for drawing the water, the milsa the tirchohu, because we won't say this is something that involves effort. U'v'rachmana lo rami alei. And I will say, again, remember, that's not the mitzvah, right? The mitzvah is the actual sprinkling, right? The mitzvah is not the drawing of the water. The mitzvah is not the transport. V'shar l'mishkol igra u'mikudashas. So I will say, you can get paid for non-mitzvah logistical activity. U'masnisin de bechoros b'schar hazah v'kidush deleka tircha u'schar limud mitzvahu no tell. Torah Amra, so therefore again, however, when the Brisa said that if you get paid for sprinkling the waters, then the water becomes invalid, or the ashes, then ultimately that's talking about someone who's actually getting paid for the mitzvah. Now I will say, this goes back for just a moment, it's the same idea that a judge who gets paid for his judgment. See, when we see that, we kind of automatically think about bribery, or a witness who gets paid ultimately, again, for his testimony. We think about that also as buying. Let's say people get paid for their testimony all the time, right? People make a living of offering expert testimony, and again, we assume the person is telling the truth. What they're talking about over here is a person is getting paid a fee for a service. They're acting in good faith, right? The judge is performing a service. So what's interesting is that the Bryce is highlighting over here is you can't get paid for the performance of a mitzvah. Now, where does this come from? I'll say this is incredible. Torah Amra Re'ei L'Marati Eschem Kasher Tzivani Ma'ani B'Chinam Afatem B'Chinam. Remember, we had this in Sechas Nedarim. We'll say what it comes from is Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't get a salary. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't get a salary, right? So because he didn't get a salary, Moshe Rabbeinu, just like Moshe Rabbeinu executed his duties, right, without compensation, that becomes a paradigm for anyone involved in a mitzvah. Ultimately, again, that they should do so without compensation as well, which is actually interesting because it raises a fascinating point, right, for those of us in certain careers of Jewish communal service about how one is allowed to draw salary for the performance of a mitzvah. So again, what that has to do with, I will say, is the concept that anyone involved in a career of Jewish communal service could have done something else, right? Could have done something else. So the community, so in other words, the salary essentially represents compensation for a career not taken, compensation for the path not taken, right, or for the path, right, for the road less traveled, so to speak. So that's what that is. But interestingly enough, the paradigm comes. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't draw a salary. That being said, remember, Moshe Rabbeinu was able to keep the shaving of the luchos. Right? Moshe Rabbeinu was entitled to. Moshe Rabbeinu had money from elsewhere. But just interesting idea. In any event, so let's finish up. So the Gemara says, "Dekinami ditani hacha mechatos or be'efer para dekatani hasam lahazos ulakadish namina." Also, you can see our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says ultimately again. I'm sorry, be'mechatos or be'efer para, and it says over there lahazos ulakadish. So our Mishnah is talking about, again, money that comes from the logistical aspects of executing para aduma. That you can get paid for. The Brisa, when saying that if you get paid for para aduma, you invalidate the water, invalidate the ashes, that's talking about actually getting paid for the actual service, the religious service itself, which invalidates everything. Incredible. Both say, Mazel Tov, Hadran Allah, Ha'ish Mekadesh. I'll say, incredible. Okay, what a profound statement. Hadran Allah, we shall return to you, Ha'ish Mekadesh. So of course, the Ish Mekadesh means Ish Mekadesh Isha. I will say, but what a way to start the day with that mantra. We should always return to the concept of Ha'ish Mekadosh, that a man has the ability to create Kiddusha. This is a mantra we should keep on returning to over and over and over again. The ability we have to affect Kiddusha, the ability we have to affect change, the ability that we have to go ahead and bring light into the world, Hadrun Aloch, that is a concept that we have to keep returning to over and over and over. We should be zochet to return constantly to the concept of Ha'ish Mekadosh, that each of us has the ability to create Kiddushin. Incredible. Great cases today. I will say, so now we're back to a little bit, I would say, like typical, more typical Kiddushin cases. So here we go. Say the Kaddish Leisha, Plonis. I guess not such a typical case, right? So Reuven says to his friend Shimon, go and betroth the woman for me. In other words, he's asking Shimon to act as his shaliach. Go and kaddish a woman for me. V'halach v'kit shaliatzmo. So this is usually the end of the friendship, right? So what happens? Shimon decides, you know what? I see what he sees in this lady. Right? So he decides to go ahead and be mekadesh the woman for himself. So what's the halacha? Mekudeshes l'sheni. Okay. It works. In other words, at the end of the day, obviously we're going to see it's bad, but Lamaisa, although Shimon was going to be Mekadesh woman for Reuven, if he was Mekadesh for himself, Lamaisa, it works. Similarly again, Reuven goes over to Rachel. He says, Rachel, become Mekadesh to me after 30 days. Right? So essentially what's happening over here is we'll see. He says, become a Kudeshes to me after 30 days. It sounds like what's happening over here is giving her the money now, but the Kiddushin doesn't take effect until 30 days from now. And then Shimon comes along and gives her Kiddushin now. So in other words, he says, become a Kudeshes to me, on Rosh Chodesh Kislev. And now Shimon comes along and says, Hari at Mikudeshes li achshav. And she accepts the money. Mikudeshes l'sheni. Ultimately, again, she's Mikudeshes, the second guy. So I'll say in both of these cases, Shimon was able to affect Kiddushin with her now. And we'll say in all of these cases, Bas Yisrael the Kohen tocha b'truma. If Shimon is a Kohen, she's allowed to go ahead and eat truma. Me'achshav, right now. I'm sorry. Tocha b'truma. Fine. Next case, we'll say. Me'achshav la'achar shloshim yom. What happens, we'll say, Reuven gave Rachel, he says, Hari at Mikudeshes li me'achshav, from now, ula'achar shloshim yom. But I will say, we're going to see, although that language is inherently contradictory, the Pashtos, what he seems to be saying is, after 30 days, what will happen after 30 days? It'll trigger what? Retroactivity clause. Right? It'll become a Kudesh to me as of now. And during the 30 days, Shimon comes along now and is Mekadesh now within the 30 days. And I will say, that case is a little bit more complicated. That's a Safek Kiddushin case. Again, we'll discuss the mechanics of that case in the Gemara. And therefore, because it's a Safek Mikudesh's case, Bas Yisrael the Kohen, Bas Kohen Yisrael lo tocha b'truma. She can't eat truma. Now, both say that she can't eat truma either way. In other words, if she's a Bas Kohen, she can't eat truma because of the Safek Kiddushin, right? And if she is marrying a Kohen, she can't eat truma because of the Safek Kiddushin. Fine. So we'll say, so those are the keys of the Mishnah. Let's analyze. So let's start with the first one. So we'll say, first case was, Reuven says to Shimon, go and be Mekadesh Rachel for me. Shimon meets Rachel and decides that he wants to marry this lady himself. So he gives her Kesed Kiddushin. Ultimately, she's Mekudeshes. Ha'omer lechaver tzei v'kadosh Tana masha asa asui ela shenag ba minad ramos. So this is interesting. In life, sometimes doing the wrong thing works, but it's still wrong. So Lamaisa, what Shimon did by being Mekadesh this woman, it works, right? It works. In other words, the Kiddushin is chal, but it's ramos, but it's inappropriate. So the Gemara says, "V'tana didan halach nami, v'tana didan halach nami diktani halach beramos." And also, you can even see it in our Mishnah. The Tana added in the lashon of halach, right? So Reuven says to Shimon, "Go mekadesh Rachel for me," and Shimon halach the kiddush. So the Tana adds in halach means he went with the wrong intentions. Okay, so we'll say, so the point over here is, just to be clear, the Gemara kind of wants to take a stance on Shimon's actions. What Shimon did works, but at the end of the day, it's wrong. Okay, so the Gemara says, so we'll say in our Mishnah, the lashon is Reuven says to Shimon, right? And he calls Shimon his friend. his friend. So the top of the test. Umashna hasam diktania omer l'shlucho. And I will say in the previous Mishnah, I was talking about the previous parak. Remember the case where Reuven says to Shimon, go and be Mekadesh Rachel for me, in Yerushalayim. He gives the Shaliach a specific place. And then the Mishnah was talking about the idea that if Shimon goes and is Mekadesh the Isha somewhere else, the Kiddushin doesn't work. Well, it's actually machlokes about whether or not when you give a specific place, is that a hakpada? Is it dafka that you want the Kiddushin only to take place in that particular area? Or if remember again, Lashon Gemara, or maybe it's what we call a maramakom. Maramakom. Just like, I'm trying to help you out so you don't have to run around looking for the Isha, okay? So we'll say, it's just picking up over here. It's a very simple question. In our Mishnah, it phrases it as Reuven says to his friend or fellow, Chavero. In the previous Mishnah, it says Omer l'shlucho, says to an agent. Why here does it use the lashon of Chavero, and why there does it use the lashon of Shlucho? It was like Tush Gemara says 59a, second line down from the top. In both cases, the Mishnah is trying to teach me a little bit of a chiddush. The Gemara says Hacharabusa Kamash Malan. So also in the previous case where he's giving him the location, it's coming to teach him the following idea. The Itana Shlucho had it said. Hacha Rabus Kamashlan. Here about saying our Mishnah, Itana Shlucho. If the Mishnah would have said Shlucho, if it would have said Reuven said to his Shaliach, the Gemara says, Hu dahavi ramai, desam chadaite, savar averli shlichuse. But say, I want to tell you something amazing. The Gemara is operating with the following premise. So let's say, which is the exact opposite premise that I would have thought intuitively. The Gemara says, out of the two words of Shaliach and Chavero, Shaliach is a stronger term than Chavero. Shliach means my agent. When I appoint an agent, I have trust that the agent is going to execute the agency as I told them. That's the concept of Shliach Shel Adam Kimoso. Chavero, we think about Chavero as like a buddy, like your friend. Chavero just means a guy, another person. Chavero is someone, again, I will say, who I have less faith in to execute the agency as I have asked him to. So watch this. So the Gemara says as follows. If our Mishnah would have said Shlucho, Havamina Shlucho hu havi ramai. I would have thought when a Shaliach betrays the Mishaliach like that, and Shimon goes ahead and marries this woman himself, that's when Shimon's a Ramai. That's when he's acting inappropriate. The Sam Chadaita, because Reuven had complete trust in the Shaliach, Savar, Avad li shlichusi. Ultimately, again, when I appoint a Shaliach, I assume the agent is going to execute the agency. Avachavero, the lo sam chadaite. I will say, you ask your friend to do something, you ask your fellow to do something. I will say, it's interesting, you know this in life. There are certain people, you ask them to do something, and you're like, there's a 50-50 chance this is going to get done, right? In reality, maybe it'll get done. Okay, I have some faith. And then there are other people, you ask them to do something, you know with almost absolute certainty that they're going to execute. The person you know you're going to execute, he's called a shaliach. The person you're maybe yes, maybe no. We've been down this road multiple times. That person is called chavero. Chavero. So I will say, I would have thought that in our Mishnah, it's only the case of shaliach, that when he betrays the confidence of Mekadesh Shlomo himself, that's when he's a rabbi. But chavero, whatever, it's totally beyond, it's not beyond the possibility that he's not going to execute it all. And if he executes, he's going to decide to marry this woman himself. The Gemara says, in the previous Mishnah also we're trying to teach a lesson. What's the lesson? Over the Chavero, the Savar lo tarach. So I'll say in the previous case also where he gave him the location, I would have thought as dafka only in the case of Chavero, where Allah is not Mekudeshes, if he's Mekadesh in a different location. Why? Because again, the Chaver is not going to be Matriach himself. But in the case of Shaliach, where ultimately I know that if I appoint the Shaliach, he's going to find the woman wherever she is. So the Maisa, maybe the location is simply a Mara Makom, just to help him out. The Gemara says Kamash Malon. So therefore the Gemara teaches us in both cases, I will say, that Allah the Maisa, that also the point the Gemara is making over here is, in both cases, the Mishnah just uses the lashon, which creates the greatest chiddush. Incredible. Ravin Chasida, I will say, this is an interesting case. Ravin Chasida, Azul Kiddushin Issa Celebrate. Ravin Chasida went out to betroth the woman for his son. So we'll say, so just to be clear, his son had appointed him as a shaliach. So son appointed father as a shaliach to mekadesh a woman for the son. Okay, what happened? So the Gemara says, Kitshel and Afshay. All right, so Ravin Chasida met her, and he was mekadesh her for himself. For himself. All right, so the Gemara says, I will say there's no need to discuss this amongst yourselves. Eyes on the page. I say at different times, right? So I say, my granddaughter has a new word. She says buckword. She doesn't say awkward. Buckword. I say I can tell you buckword. All right, little buckword. Fine. So the Gemara says as follows. So what happened? So the Gemara says Vatanya masha asa aso elishanag ba minag ramos. But 1 second. How could Ravin Chasida do this, Rabosai? After all, again, the Mishnah says, fine, it works, but lamaisa, it's not appropriate, right? It's a minhag ramos. In other words, somebody appoints you as an agent to execute something, and then you take it for yourself. Okay, it works, but lamaisa is not appropriate. Tishimar says, no, here's the case. Lo yavan ehile. I will say, when Ravin Chasida came to suggest the shidduch, the girl's family would not agree to the girl marrying Ravin's son. They didn't agree to the shidduch, bless you. What they did agree to is, Ravin, if you would like to marry her, that will agree to. So this was a different kind of case. The agency that he was appointed to carry out, at the end of the day, was not possible. Therefore, halacha l'maisa, again, he married her. Gemara says, okay, but ibayle la'aduye, should Ravin, don't you think it may be kedai to go back, have a little talk with your son, sit down a little bit, a cup of coffee, or maybe a cup of vodka, whatever. So Lamaisa, like, don't you have to go back and say something? In other words, I would say, I understand, and now I understand the mechanics of the case. The girl's family was not agreeable to the shidduch. I got it. So now Ravin, but don't you have to go back and now go ahead and talk about it to this. And Savar, Ravin was concerned about that of what? If halacha l'maisa they would do that, then by the time ultimately again he got back, so this apparently was a fine young lady and maybe a fine family. He was afraid that someone else would have been mekadesh her. So therefore again he felt he had to act now, because if not, that would have been a lost opportunity. Okay, another case we'll say Rabbi Bar Chana Yoav leZuzi the Rav. So we'll say Rabbi Bar Chana gave money to Rav. Amar Zabna Nehili Lehai Ara. He said to Rav, go ahead, I want to purchase a particular field, a piece of land. Go out and you purchase it for me. Here's the money. Bima Shaleach, purchase it for me. Azal Zabna Lenafshe. Ultimately, we'll say what happened. Rav saw the parcel, bought it for himself. The Gemara says, okay, well, that's not appropriate. It works, in other words, fine. Lamaisa, you did it, but it's Ramos, it's not appropriate. So which the Gemara says, no, what's the case? We'll say it was a place where the other people in the area, apparently there were like some other landowners who controlled the area. They were powerful people. They would not ultimately, again, have sold to Rav Bar Chana, but they were willing to sell to Rav. So once again, this is a different type of situation where the transaction couldn't have unfolded as originally planned. So therefore, Rav took advantage of the opportunity to buy for himself. Still Rav, you should have come back to Rav Bar Chana, tell him what was going on, and let's say, listen, they won't sell you the land, but I could buy it myself. To which the Gemara says, Savar adahachi v'hachi asa in shachrina zavinla. He was concerned that what? If he would go back and tell Rabbi Barachan, by the time he get back, the land will be sold. I will say, there's an incredible Musar Haskell from both of these cases, which is, opportunity waits for no one. So this happens to us all the time in life, where opportunities present themselves, and we'll say, oh, you know what, I'll get back. Let me think about it. Let me discuss it a little bit. And I will say, 9 out of 10 times, especially with really good opportunities, if you wait, they're gone. Right? If you wait, at the end of the day, by the time you decide to get back to it, by the time it's convenient, and by the time all the ducks are in a row, the stars are in alignment, often they're gone. This is the concept of mitzvah habali adecha al tach mitzena. When a mitzvah doesn't just mean a mitzvah means a life opportunity for development, for growth, for self-actualization. I will say, when that happens, ultimately again, take advantage. I will have to tell you something amazing. Yesterday I gave a share to a women's Rosh Chodesh group. And I was thinking about the concept, because it's very much like on my mind presently today, about Kabbalah, thinking about Kabbalah, and about what the person could take on in these difficult times. So there's something amazing. Like an hour later, right, a group had taken on Kabbalahs. It was absolutely like amazing to see. Maybe it's difference between men and women, right? Maybe just women have the ability to like react to things faster, and like it was just such, because like a lot of times I think about Kabbalahs, and we've spoken about this a lot. I put this out in the chats. I put out the 24-hour learning. I will say I was so hoping already that entire spreadsheet would have been filled up. It's a half hour of learning for Achinu B'nai Yisrael. It's like something tangible, and I appreciate everyone who did it already. But Chevra, like everyone has a half hour. You know, we have a half hour to be on every single WhatsApp group, and a half hour to go out and check the news. We have an extra half hour to learn, and if we really want to do something, but I don't know, for some reason, like we tend to just take a lot more time in making concrete decisions and doing things that really matter in life. And just understand that by the time we get around to things, often, again, they're just gone. They're just gone. Think back in your own life. How many crossroads did you stand at where you had an opportunity to do something? And like, whatever, I dragged my feet intentionally, unintentionally, and then by the time like I got it together, I know in my personal life I have this. By the time I got it together, like it was just gone. It was just gone. Adahachi vahachi asa inish achrina. If you wait too long in life to seize your opportunities, lemaisa again they're gone. I will say, and again, I'll take the opportunity now just to mention, if you haven't signed up for a half hour of learning, this is something, again, I will say, we could have 24 hours of learning every single day. We have Chaver from Eretz Yisrael that signed up for the slots when we're sleeping here in Chutz La'aretz. Take a half hour. That's your half hour. And commit yourself. Every one of us has time. We all have time. Otherwise, I'm gonna start making individual requests. You don't want to be bothered by me for individual requests. Don't make me make your requests. Sign up. That sheet should be filled up multiple times over. If we could show Achinu B'nai Yisrael that we're learning 24 hours a day for their benefit, what is schos? If you don't take your slot, it'll get filled up. Someone else will take it, but it could have been yours. Rav Gidol hava mahapech bahi ara. So I will say Rav Gidol was trying to buy a particular piece of land. Another incredible case. Let's listen to this. Also Rabbi Abba Zabne. So I will say this case is a little bit different. In this case over here, so ultimately, again, Rav Gidol was trying to purchase something, right? And now Rabbi Abba came and bought it from under him. I don't know if that's the right term, but you understand, like he was trying to purchase something, and then Rabbi Abba came along and bought it himself. So Azur Rav Gidol Kable Rabbi Zera. Rav Gidol came and complained to Rabbi Zera. After all, again, what's going on over here? Like I was trying to purchase this, and Rabbi Abba came along and bought it instead. So we'll say what happened. So as Rabbi Zera v'kabli Rabbi Yitzchak nafka. Rabbi Zera went to tell Rabbi Yitzchak nafka. Amarlei hamtin ad shiyala etzleinu l'regel. Wait until Rabbi Abba comes during the regalim, and ultimately again, right, because we have to be ola regel, and we'll talk to him about it. Kisal kashkechis, your son of Rabbi Abba came up during one of the regalim, and what happened? Amarlei ani mahapich becharara uba achar behemenu uba achar v'nat leimenu mai. So they asked Rabbi Abba the following kasha: if a poor person is trying to secure, we'll say charara is like a biscuit. A piece of bread, a loaf of bread. An ani is trying to run after and get a piece of bread, and somebody else snatches it up. What's talacha? Amarlei nikra Rasha. So Rabbi Abba says the person's called Rasha. You see another Jew trying to acquire something, and you swoop in instead, and you take it. That's called Rishos. Ve'elamar my time avarachi. So Rabbi says it's incredible. So Rabbi Yitzchak said to Rabbi Abba, so Rabbi Abba, why did you do this? You saw Rav Gidol was trying to purchase a piece of property, and you just swooped in, gave a higher bid, and took it. Amarlei lahavi yedana. Rabbi Abba said, I had no idea. That Rav Gidol was trying to purchase the property. Hashtanami nisnin nehelemar. So Rabbi Yitzchak said, fine. So give it to Rav Gidol now. In other words, Rav Gidol. By the way, I just want to point out this topic is actually a fascinating one. Happens to apply to Jews who live in densely Jewish neighborhoods where there is limited housing, right? You may be aware of communities like this, where Jews are bidding against each other for homes. It's just, again, it it's mutter, but it's interesting, the dynamics of it are in business. When you know that another Jew is trying to accomplish something, what are my rights? In other words, there has to be open markets. There have to be open markets, right? Business world has to exist a business world. But lamaisa, again, what are the rights? This concept of ani amahapech becharara. When you see a Jew trying to acquire something, what rights do I have? What rights do I have to go ahead and? What rights do I have to go ahead and kind of swoop in there and do something else? So they said to Rabbi Abba had no idea that Rav Gidel was trying to acquire it. So Rabbi Yitzchak said to Rabbi Abba, go give it to Rav Gidel. So he said, listen to this. He said, Amarle, Zabuni lo mezabne de'ared kamaisihi, v'lo mnesam milsa. So apparently, the first piece of land that you buy, that's like your first real estate deal. It's not good mazel to sell your first deal. Right? I guess the first deal is the one you hold on to. So Rabbi Abba said, I'm not willing to go ahead and sell it, but here's what I will do. So I'm happy to give it as a gift to Rav Gidel. I made a mistake. I had no idea it was about. I won't sell it to him, but ultimately, again, I will give it to him. I will give it to him. So Rav Gidel Rav Gidel wouldn't accept it as a gift. Why not? Because Rav Gidel didn't want to accept it as a gift, because gifts always come with strings. So literally again, Chazal say that a person who hates gifts will live a long life. Rabbi Abba wouldn't use it because now he realized that Rav Gidel wanted to purchase it. So both say lo mar nochis. No one used the piece of land. Right? Rabbi Abba wouldn't use it because he felt bad because Rav Gidel was trying to acquire it. Rav Gidel wouldn't accept it as a gift because so I'll say what happened. So the Gemara says lo mar nochislav lo mar nochislav. Rabbi Abba wouldn't use it. Rav Gidel wouldn't use it. Umiskeri arad rabbanan. We'll say who did use it? Did use it. All the other Rabbanim, right? So it became known as the land of the Rabbanim. In other words, it was essentially like Hefker. So in other words, people used it. People used it. Stam the Arad Rabbanim, the rabbis used it because again, neither of Gidel nor Rabbi Abba were willing to use it. Okay, incredible. V'chino omer ha'isha is his kadshili. So we'll say. So now listen to this. So now remember again that the halacha is if a man says, remember again, second case of the Mishnah, Reuven says to Rachel, become Mikudeshes me after 30 days, and Shimon comes along within the 30 days and gives her Kiddushin. What's the halacha? She's Mikudeshes to Shimon. So the Gemara says, Lo ba'achar v'kidusha v'sol shloshim ma'u. What happens if Shimon didn't come along within the 30 days? What's the halacha? In other words, is her first Kiddushin valid? Rabbi Shmuel Silber Mikudeshes. Of course. In other words, Reuven gave her Kiddushin. The Kiddushin is not chal for 30 days. But after 30 days, assuming no one else came and was Mekadesh, ultimately she's Mikudeshes. V'afapi shenis achlu amos. So here's what's interesting. This is true even though the money is gone at the end of 30 days. Right? So even though the money is no longer, halacha l'maisa, she is still Mikudeshes. My time, I will say, what's the reason? Now this is interesting, right? In other words, so just to be clear, Reuven is giving Rachel money on Rosh Chodesh Cheshvan. He says, Ha'at Mikudeshes li with money zu, b'ma'o zu, la'achar shloshim yom. So the Kiddush is not for 30 days. Okay, nothing happens during the 30 days. Now comes Rosh Chodesh Kislev, she's Mikudeshes. Even though the money no longer is in existence, she spent the money. Now, what's the reason? It's actually very interesting. My time, because the money is neither a loan, the lola pikadon, nor is it a pikadon, nor is it a security. So the Gemara says, "Lepikadon lo dam, pikadon b'shus demar kamasli." It's not a pikadon because in general, like a deposit is used by the owner. She's technically speaking not the owner of the money. The man was the owner of the money. V'hani b'shusa didei kamasakli, and yet this money is being used in her rishus. We'll say first wide line. Nun tesam dalv lemilva nami lo dami. It's not considered to be a loan. Why not? Because ultimately, again, money, we'll say a loan is used for commerce, right? And ultimately, again, Hani B'Torah's Kiddushin Yahavi Nihila. These were given to her as for Kiddushin and not ultimately, again, for any transactional purposes, not for financial transactional purposes. So I will say, all the Gemara's pointing out over here is, if no one else is Mekadesh during the 30 days, she's Mikudeshes Reuven, but not only that, even if the money was spent over the course of 30 days, so by the time Rosh Chodesh Kislev rolls around, the money is no longer in existence, she is still Mikudeshes. Incredible. Lo ba'achar b'kidusha v'chazra ba'mahu. Okay, let's say this is fascinating. What happens? Let's say, so here's the case. Reuven comes over to Rachel on Rosh Chodesh Cheshvan, says, Hari at Mikudeshes li b'ma'os zula achar shloshim yom, become Mikudeshes in 30 days from now. Okay, so we've established No one else comes along and is mekadesh her, fine. Right? She uses up the money, fine. Rabbi say, what happens if during the 30 days she decides, I don't want this? Does she have the ability to renege on the Kiddushin? Mao. Rabbi Yochanan says, yes, she has the ability to renege. Why? Asi dibor umavatal dibor. Rabbi say, one act of speech could go ahead and negate another. Remember again, he said to her, Hari'at nikudeshesli, right? Hari'at nikudeshesli, that's a dibor. She could say, I don't want it. That's also a dibor. Her second dibor could go ahead and uproot the first dibor. Rish Lakish says, no, she can't renege. And I will say what she can't renege means is, if she wants out of this, what has to happen? What has to happen? The pasha, she needs a get. Right? A simple dibor is not going to be enough. Lo azi dibor vatal dibor. Rish Lakish holds one act of speech cannot negate another act of speech. So I will say this is fascinating. Here we go. Eis Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan is Chash Rabbi Rish Lakish. Bitel. So let's listen to this. I appoint a shaliach to take truma for me, from my produce. Now what happens? If I void the shlichus, I say to him, you're no longer my shaliach. Imat shalo taram bitel ain't truma so truma. So we'll say, if I'm about the shlichus before the shliach has the ability to separate any trumas and maisus, and then he subsequently separates out truma, his designation is not a valid designation. Now what is this a case of? The dibor udibrahu, the kaasi dibor vatal dibor. So we'll say, what is this a case of? This is a case of here. I appoint the shliach to go ahead and separate out truma for me, and then what? And then what? I say to him, I don't want you to be my shaliach. And what do you see from here? It works. It works. So what do you see from here? One act of speech can go ahead and void a previous act of speech. The Gemara says, no. The case of Kiddushin is different. Mostly I will say the act of Kiddushin is not simply a dibor. Because remember again, what is he doing? What is Ruvain doing? He's giving her money. I will say that's not a dibor, that's a maisa. That's an act. So because that's a maisa, I will say, dibor speech can't upend a maisa. The Gemara says, "V'lo asi dibor m'vatal maisa." Eisei raises another kasha. Hashalech get liishto. Reuven sends a get to his wife Rachel. Sends with the shaliach. What happens? So v'higia b'shaliach o sheshalach acharav shliach. V'amar lo get shnasati lecha batal. Harei ze batal. So we'll say Reuven gave a get to a shaliach. He sent the shaliach to go and give the get to Rachel. Then after the shaliach leaves, he changes his mind. He runs after the shaliach and he's mabatal the get. So we'll say, what's that halacha? It's batal. It's batal. But v'hanesinas get liat shaliach. Tichi nachis mot liat ishadami. V'katani harei ze batal. So we'll say, listen to this. But isn't the act of giving a get to a shaliach tantamount to the act of giving kesef kiddushin to the woman? And yet you can be mabatal the shlichos. To which the Gemara says, no. Hasam nami kol kamadolo mate gitali ada dibor v'diborhu. Asi dibor umavatal dibor. Now we'll say it's not true. The act of giving the get to the shaliach is not a maisa. It's not a maisa. What is it? It's not an action. What is it? It's a dibor. And therefore, I will say one dibor could come and be mavatal another dibor. Okay. So the Gemara says, Eiser Shalakish Rabbi Yochanan. Reish Lakish is Kash Rabbi Yochanan. This is a fascinating case. Kol HaKelim Yardin L'Dei Tumasa Machshava. So we'll say, let's say this in a simple way, although the details are actually a little bit more complex. We'll say a kli, a utensil, is only mekabel tuma when it is completed. When it is completed. At what point is a kli completed? So we'll say, fascinatingly enough in halacha, a kli is completed when you have das that is complete. Right? When my das is, this kli is done, it's done. At that point, it is mekabel tuma. I will say, even though on a technical level, there may be actually more stages to the normal completion of this kli, if it's done enough for me. For me, it's complete, then it's mekabel tuma. But I will say, so that's true. Therefore, a kli is mekabel tuma. What that means is machshava. As soon as I have machshava that this kli is done, ultimately the kli is mekabel tuma. I will say, now once a kli is mekabel tuma, so I will say the only way that Tumah status leaves it is how? Bishinui Maisa. If you do something, of course you could kasher the Kli, depending on the Kli, but Lamaisa again, what you could also do is change the Kli. So I will say, so for example, if you have a Kli, we've learned this before, if you have a Kli that's Tameh, and you make a hole in that Kli, and now that hole is big enough that Kli is no longer functional, it's lost its identity as a Kli. If you then go ahead and plug up the hole, that's like a new Kli, Panim Chadosh Ba'olakan, and the Kli is tar. So that's what it means. A kli can be makabel to machshava, but only changes its tuma status ultimately again through maisa. Amud Beis will say. So maisa motzi midei maisa. So you see here that an action ultimately again has the ability to undo a previous action, umiyad machshava, and has the ability also to undo a machshava. Machshava in motzia lo miyad maisa v'lo machshava. I will say, but ultimately again, a machshava, a thought by itself, doesn't have the ability to undo either a maisa or previous machshava. So bishlama miyad maisa lo mafga. So I understand why ultimately again a machshava can't undo a maisa. Why? The lo asi dibor umavat maisa. The same way as an act of speech can't undo a maisa. Elamiyad machshava miyad tepok. But I will say ultimately again, why can't one machshava undo another machshava? In other words, I will say, if I had a machshava, ultimately again that the kli is done, right? Which means now that the kli is makabel tuma. And now I will say, I have another machshava. The kli is not done. I changed my mind. Apparently that doesn't work. Why shouldn't that work? One machshava should be able to go ahead and be motzi from another machshava, the same way that one dibur, one act of speech, could undo another act of speech. I will say, this is incredible. Shiny machshava de tuma, dechi maisa dami. Wow. I will say, because literally again a machshava of tuma is like a maisa. What does that mean? That I will say, when I have in mind that my kli is finished, I will say, that machshava, that is like a maisa. And I've concretized the identity of the kli as a complete kli. Once you concretize the identity of the kli as a complete kli, then what? Then what? As they say, no backseas, right? That's it. That's it. We're done, and you can't reverse that process. It is as if it is a maisa. Therefore, a subsequent machshava or a subsequent dibor cannot go ahead and reverse that designation. So first of all, that phrase, I will say by itself, is such a profound phrase as well. Shiny machshavas de tuma dechi maisa dami. I will say, we know this. Even though HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't treat thoughts of Aveira or thoughts of Tumah like a Maisa, Baruch Hashem for that. I will say impure thoughts, inappropriate thoughts, Aveira-dika thoughts, they change us. They change us. Even though what I think is not what I do, but what I think absolutely influences what I do. What I think about, what I dream about, what I desire, the thoughts that I have that I go through my mind, they absolutely impact me as well. Which, although of us are not held accountable for those thoughts, right? But Lamaisa, again, after hopefully we reach a level where we're able to refine our actions, the next stage ultimately again is Taras HaMachshava, to try in some way to work on purity of thought as well. Because at the end of the day, on some level, Machshava Tumah, Dechimai Sedamu. I don't know if, on a hashkafic level, we're not necessarily saying that a Machshava of Tumah is actually like a Maisa, but I also know that enough machshavas of tumah, enough inappropriate or impure thoughts, ultimately lead me down the road, the wrong actional road as well. Ukidraf Papa, Damrap Papa Ramik Sebos is actually quite fascinating. Rav Papa contrasts the Pasuk says, Kiyitain v'karinan kiyutan. So we'll say this is talking about food. Food items are only mekabel tumah after they come in contact with liquid. With liquid, one of the 7 liquids. So the pasuk says kiyitain, you will place, but I read it as kiyutan. Haketzad kiyutan dumya dechiyitain. I will say now kiyutan means if liquid will be placed on it. Kiyitain means you will place liquids on it. So the Gemara says ma yitain denechale. Just like I will say yitain means something you did. If you did it, it means that you want it. Af yutan denechale. So too ultimately yutan means it was good for you as well. In other words, I will say food items only become tamei when they come in contact with liquid, but only if you wanted that contact of liquid, right? So either how does it happen that you want it? Either you did it yourself, or when it happened, you were okay with the fact that the food items came in contact with liquid. That way, ultimately, is makabel tumah. Fine. Rav Zvid maseh lahashmai saha. So Rav Zvid will say. So remember again, what we have over here is a fundamental machlokas Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. What's the fundamental machlokas? Do we say asi dibur umavakel dibur? Does one act of speech have the ability to go ahead and negate a previous act of speech? Rabbi Yochanan said yes. Reish Lakish said no. Where is this machlokis coming up, Rabbi Osai? Reuven comes over to Rachel, says, Rachel, you're mikudeshes to me. After 30 days, gives her the money. During the 30 days, she has a change of heart. She doesn't want to marry him anymore. Can she retract? Can she retract? Rabbi Yochanan says yes. Reish Lakish says no. That's the machlokes. Comes along. Good. Just lost the place. Rav Zvid brings up this machlokes in a different context. What's the context? So Rav Zvid just frames this in the second part of the Mishnah. What's the second part of the Mishnah? Rachel gave Rishus to Shaliach to accept Kiddushin. Then what happens? Rachel herself accepts Kiddushin from another man. So what's happening over here? So Rachel dispatched a Shaliach to accept Kiddushin from Ruvain. In the meantime, Rachel accepted Kiddushin from Shimon. What's the halacha? So v'halki v'kiddush asma im shala kidmu l'kiddusha im shala kidmu kiddushin. So if Rachel accepted Kiddushin ultimately again from Shimon first, then the Kiddushin is good. But if we'll say essentially it's a race to the finish line. Whoever accepted Kiddushin first, that's who the Kiddushin first. Shliach accepted first, that's Chal. If she accepted first, that's Chal. Chazra b'mahu. We'll say, what happens if halacha l'maisa? What happens if halacha l'maisa? Rachel, right, she accepted the Kiddushin. And we'll say, there's also a case of where there's a delayed Kiddushin after 30 days. And now, ultimately, again, she wants to retract. What's the halacha? Rabbi Yochanan says she can retract. Rish Lakish says she can't retract. I will say, it's the same machlokes. Same machlokes. All Rav Zvid is just doing it is framing the machlokes in a different case. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Chozeres Asi Dibur Battle Dibur. Rabbi Yochanan says she could retract. Why? One act of speech could void a previous act of speech. Rish Lakish Amar Einu Chozeres. Rish Lakish says no, she can't retract. Why? Lo Asi Dibur Mabatal Dibur. One act of speech can't retract another act of speech. Asi Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish. So I'll say, so ultimately again, so I'll say we're going to go through the whole same thing that we did before. Bitel, so as I appointed a shaliach to separate truma. Same thing you said before. Emat shlo taram bitel. As long as before the shaliach did anything, I was mavat l'shlichos in truma so truma. Rabbi Achman asking, what's the case over here? Kigon shekidim balabayis v'taram eskerio. The case also over here is where I went ahead and tied my own produce. The Gemara says the havile maisa. That's a maisa. So my maisa of tithing my own produce upended the dibur of having appointed a shaliach to do so. Fine. All kelim are rendered fit Makal Tuma with thought. Once I decide the kli is done, the kli is done. Makal Tuma. So what do you say? We'll say, same case you just said before. What do you see from here? An action has the ability to go and upend the previous action, a previous machshava. Machshava in machshava. But a machshava thought doesn't have the ability to upend the maisa, nor does it have the ability to upend the previous machshava. So bishlam liyad maisa lo mafka. I understand why a machshava doesn't have the ability to upend the maisa. Lo asi dibor umevatel maisa. A dibor can't upend the maisa. Elam yad machshava miha tafik. But from machshava ultimately again it should have ended. Amalei shani machshava the tuma tichi maistam, as you just said before. A machshava of tuma is different. But we'll say because a machshava of tuma, i.e., a machshava that says the kli is done, that is as effective as a maisa. Ukidrat papa, dirat papa rami ksiv. We'll say first wide line ksiv kiyitain the karina kiyutan hakisad kiyutan dumya diyitain. Mayitain dinechale af yutan nami dinechale. Fine. So we'll say all the same previous cases. Ace second wide line. A man sends a get to his wife. We'll say all the same case we saw before. And then he catches up with the shaliach. Or he sends another shaliach after the first one. The get I gave you is batal. Harizeh batal. Ultimately, again, it's batal. So we'll say, what do you see from here? That a dibor can be mevatel a dibor. We'll say that's the bottom line. You see, again, appointment of an agent is a dibor. If I change my mind, then what can I do? We'll say, what can I do? I can say, you're not my shaliach. That's asi dibor umevatel dibor. One act of speech has the ability to mevatel another act of speech. Tiyufta, the Reish Lakish, tiyufta. I will say this effectively refutes the position of Reish Lakish. So we'll say paskin like Rabbi Yochanan, i.e. asi dibor umevatel dibor. Which I will say, just to plug this back into the case, what that means is that if Reuven gives Rachel Kiddushin, and he says, become a Kiddushin after 30 days. Rabbi say she already spent the money. Then day 26, she's getting cold feet. She doesn't want to marry Reuben anymore. What does she need to do? All she needs to do is say, no thank you. And her dibor could come and up and the previous dibor. That's it. Asi dibor umevatal dibor. That's the halacha Rabbi say. The halacha Rabbi say Rabbi Yochanan vafilu b'kamaisa. And we'll say ultimately again, that's actually what we were just saying before. Right? That's what I just mentioned before. The halacha l'maisa, halacha follows Rabbi Yochanan even in the case of the Mishnah, namely asi dibor umevatal dibor. The afagav digalim shani nesina smells that ishay tikamaisa dami afilu hachi asa dibor umevatal dibor. And I will say even though one could say, but isn't the act of giving money a dibor, right? Isn't the act of giving money a maisa? The answer is it's not. And I will say, now, normally the act of giving money, I was supposed to, just to frame this, then we'll stop over here for today, just to be clear. I will say, in a typical case, Reuven gives Rachel kesef Kiddushin. Hari'at mikudeshes li bekesef zu. She accepts it. Then she decides, oh no, what did I do? I will say, what's the halacha? She needs a get. Why? She's married. Remember, what's different about this case? The delay. In this whole case, he's saying, here's the money now. We're married after 30 days. 30 days from now. That's the case where now we're passing Rabbi Yochanan, Asi Dimra Bavatal Dibur. One speech could come and upend and negate another act of speech, and therefore, again, she's not married. She can get out, simple deal. So let's say, we'll stop over here for today. So again, we have a lot to do tomorrow, Meretz Hashem. But now we see the Gemara conclusively paskes like Rabbi Yochanan, Asi Dibur Umavatal Dibur. One act of speech has the ability to upend and negate a previous act. Rosai, Shkoyach.